Welcome back to A Bite from the Money Sandwich, where we provide practical and easy to understand tips and ideas on how to manage your money better, so as to let you retire with comfort and on your own terms. When thinking about the roles of women and men in the workforce, there are still some default assumptions which continues to fuel the gender gap. Today I'm joined by Danielle Dobson, who is the founder of Code Conversations and author of Breaking the Gender Code. Danielle uses her research and experiences to help women and men work together to break the gender code so that they can be the leader, partner, parent, as well as the person they want to be. Danielle speaks about how we need to break down the code and how this can benefit businesses, but also allow women and men to focus on what they value the most. Well, welcome, Danielle, to the show.
Thank you for having me, Mark. I'm really excited to be part of this.
Excellent. We'll start at the beginning. You started your corporate career as a CPA, but I've just loved how you're now moving to this field of helping women, and now women in leadership roles, which is absolutely something that's very missing in Australia, at least. What started you into this new career, and what do you enjoy about this new work of yours?
That's a great question. How long have we got here? I guess, really the change actually started when I had my first son. So that was almost 16 years ago in the US. So I worked for a Silicon Valley-based company, and we're about to move back to Australia at the time. And I'm 100% out type of person. Like, work was everything, long hours. That's where my friendship, groups were and everything. And so I knew when I was a parent and Alex came along that I just couldn't go back to that world. So I decided to be 100% parent. And then my husband at the time was traveling a lot. So I was a staying home parent for about 6 years. And I always had projects, and I was always into fitness and sport and healthy living. So I decided to become a personal trainer, and I specialized in helping women who had children. And I loved being part of the transformation, loved it. But I actually wanted them to be their own personal trainer. So I wanted them to drive themselves. I wanted them to be saying, no, I'm not going to eat this. Yes, I'm going to get up to exercise. I'm going to get some sleep. But it just wasn't happening. So I delved down into the psychology of it, and I became a wellness coach. And because I thought I could make more of a difference there and more of an impact. And the interesting thing was, like you mentioned about, why do you do it and what do you love? I will never forget that first session that I ever had with a client. It was when I was, training to be a coach. And she had this shift, this breakthrough. And in that moment, it was like all these sort of fireworks went off for me. I'm like, I still get emotional when I think about it now, because I'm like, this is what I'm meant to do. This is why I'm here, to help people, see their brilliance, because I see it in everyone that I meet. And so to help them see it, acknowledge it, connect with it, and use it. So that's why I do what I do now.
And wonderful to have that purpose and to realize, your reason for being. I think it's like anything, and for people with their health, with their weight, with their finances, a lot of times when you see them and say, I can't save, that's a symptom, not the actual reason. And you're obviously, yes, I can help you get fitter, but there's a reason why you struggle with getting fit or losing weight. So, absolutely getting into the psychology of it. You must have had so many people just realizing, it's not getting fit or losing weight. It's actually, let's go deeper than that.
Absolutely. And one thing I learned very early on is it's never about the thing. So people would come to me and say, I wanted to lose weight. But it's never about the weight, and I've listened to a couple of your other podcasts, and I loved the one with Natasha, where she says, a similar thing. It's not about that actual thing. It's what it gives you. And you mentioned it too around money. It's what less weight gives you. What does it mean to you? What's behind it? So that's where, the personal training is like the execution. The wellness coaching is, getting to the heart, and that's kind of my driver with everything. It's like I'm that annoying kid that never grew out of asking why. So just asking why, getting to the root cause. So I'd be coaching these women who were incredible, strategic, intelligent, highly successful in what they did, like, lawyers, senior lawyers, partners in accounting firms, journalists, people working at embassies when I was over in China. And I was like, what is going on here? They can do this. They've got everything, going for them. Why can't they prioritize their own well-being? What's behind it? And then I noticed in the process that they were feeling like they just were not doing good enough at anything, like at work, at home, with their health. I'm like, what is behind this? It's not just about, healthy habits or,
Mm,
working harder or trying harder. So that's what got me interested in finding out what's behind it.
mm.
So, yes.
And time obviously has a lot to do with it as well. People
Mhm,
find that would be definitely an outcome of how you're helping people is you're giving them back time, because once they actually realize
mhm,
frustratingly that they're wasting just so much time on just noise,
mhm,
or just on things that just don't really matter. Uh, there must be, because I always say to people, yes, you've got your work, you've got your family, hobbies, or everything else, but you've only got 24 hours in a day.
mhm,
Something has to
mhm,
give, and that causes stress in itself. So
mhm.
you must find, I never had so much time, free time again.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. And I think a really great maybe checkup, for people listening, and this is what I use with my clients too. When we think about time, like our precious resources are time and energy, so our attention and our time, and also money. So to get a real read on where you're at, what I like to challenge people to do is look at their calendar and their credit card statements. So that's just because it's two C's, but where they're spending their money and where they're spending their time. And if people say, okay, family's really important to me or my health's really important to me, but if you've got back to back meetings where you're sitting down all day, or you're spending money on that, wine club and actually drinking it or eating out a lot, then there's a misalignment there. So it's
Yeah.
getting back into realignment, understanding where you're at, using that kind of approach to understand more about yourself and what you're actually prioritizing. You're right, we've got 24 hours in the day. So it's how we ascribe value to the way we spend it.
Yeah, and I feel that's just a great tip, just alone, just the credit card and the calendar, because I'm just feeling I'm just in the back of my mind looking at thinking of my calendar for this just the last 2 weeks, and I'm just sort of saying, yeah, okay, to what my priorities are. So I think that we should challenge everyone to have it try that out.
Mhm,
Work-life balance,
mhm.
therefore, is the whole point. Why? I think you sort of touched on it, and there's stress, there's other things, but why actually is it so important?
Mm, and that's a really great question. And being someone who challenges the status quo and popular narrative, I don't actually speak about it in terms of work-life balance. I talk about it as so we've just got one life, and we choose how we live it, what we ascribe value to based on what's most important to us. So, you know, and striving for a balance point, because I think when we think of balance, we think there's some magical point where everything is
Mm,
balanced. And I think it's more of looking at how, we're feeling and what we're doing and whether we're aligned with what's most important to us. Because, if we look at ourselves, and this is another thing I use with clients, is looking at a four, like a quadrant, and looking where we are, emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And I typically go through a process where you give a mark out of 10 in all of those quadrants, and then really reflecting on that, and then looking at where you want to be, and how you can get there. So rather than sort of necessarily looking at in terms of times and a balance point, it's really all of these different types of those quadrants. They're actually different sources of energy, so that give us energy. And it's not actually having an equal amount in all necessarily. It's about the interplay between each of them. So for me, if I use everyone else's language, what work life balance looks like for someone is going to be very different to you. And that is based on what you value and what your energy sources are and your energy drains. So I guess I challenge the work-life balance narrative, and also the juggling narrative. Like, where did that come from? I don't. I really. I'm someone who tries to find out all these things. I haven't put the energy into finding out. But if we talk about it's a juggling act. So many mums will say it's a juggling act. When you think about juggling, that's kind of like a circus performance, and it's not really a skill that most people want to develop. But if you think about what we're actually doing, we are actually project managing life, our own lives and other people's lives. So actually, it's more of a project management role, or a CEO role, or a COO role, or something, rather than juggling. And that's so important to acknowledge.
And I think, you make some really valid points there, about the whole work-life balance and that where that came from and the juggling. And, you hear it so often that women are called multitaskers. Well, yes, okay, it's good to be as long as you task the right tasks. Because one of the things I find, and keep going back from my background with the financial side, I see people, well, yes, there is only so many hours in a day, and you're trying to balancing so many balls up in the air. And yes, you're trying to your children, your work, your social life, and all that, and yet you feel like, oh, well, I should also have all my finances under control. I should,
Mm-hmm.
I want to go buy a property. I'll spend every weekend for the next 2 months to go and try and find that property. There's some things you can outsource. Some things,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, like family, you can't outsource. But it's amazing
Mm.
how many people try and say, no, I should be able to do it all. And it's just, I've always found that hard to get that across. The best tennis players in the world still need a coach. They still need people helping them. And you must find, just even as you said, helping people with their health and exercise, it just led to this basically full-time coaching career because people do need help, don't they?
Absolutely. And I love your point about that, about, needing help and support, because I'm big on this concept of the village. So, we talk
Right.
about it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village to build a career, it takes a village to do anything. So, because of the way we're so fortunate to be mobile and we move away from our villages a lot of the time. And that's what happens to me. I grew up in Melbourne. Now I'm, via in some other countries. I'm now near Sydney, and so I've had to build my village from scratch. In terms of all of the support networks. And if you have a look, like you said, at high performers, at sports people, they have a team of people that
Mm.
help them. I spoke to one person in my research. She's a VP of a Fortune, probably 100 company, incredible woman, 2 young children. She calls herself a Ferrari,
Mm.
and she has all of these people in her pit crew. And every year she will put on a spring party for them. So this is someone who's her stylist, her nanny, her naturopath, her gardener, someone who organises her travel. And she acknowledges them all, because this is what we don't actually see a lot. We see the success, we see the people in the centre stage, but actually it's all of those people who are, techies and behind the scenes, and the people wearing black that no one ever sees.
Yes.
Um, they and from speaking, and myself as well, there's so much that goes into getting us on
Mm.
stage. And that's exactly the same with success. So, we need to build that village, and having people in our village like mentors and sponsors and friends and family is all brilliant. And you and I both know, though, that a coach
Mm.
is what can really make the difference, because there's the accountability piece, but there's that piece of seeing that person's inner brilliance and not bringing our own stuff to it. Very uncluttered, clear view, and it's all about that person in the support role to help them bring out their brilliance. So I think that's a really, no agenda, being that support crew, being that, that techie, that person who's holding you up to be your best and help you be an expert of you.
And it doesn't need to cost a lot. Now, yes, you've got family, friends, you've got family, you've got friends, people in business, they if you ask, it's amazing how many people are willing to help you and give you advice,
Mhm,
and just even being a sounding board. You don't even have to
mhm,
have to give advice. Just to be able to, well, I'm doing this. What do you think of that? Just to be able to say it out loud, what your problem is or what your thoughts are. It makes such a difference when you've got a sounding board, and the people will do that. People will be willing to be invested for you to be successful. It's incredible once you try and reach out. But I also do believe there are people out there who are specialists in their field.
mhm,
If you want to get into Facebook marketing, if you want to get into speaking, there will be coaches out there that are specialized and will save you years of
mhm.
time and effort and wasted money, because they've already done this and they can help and bring their expertise to your whatever your specific thing is. I actually remember going to America, and I was in my 30s, and I just didn't realize how important it was. But there's this very successful advisor over there, and he actually put this whole presentation was as a gridiron team, an NFL
Mhm,
team, and he
mhm.
said, there's a head coach, then there's a defensive coach, and there's four, and he put that to everything to his business, from marketing to sales to, and he even had a head coach which looked after all the other coaches for all of them, and he was hugely successful. But I just thought you couldn't have that many people in your business. But now looking back, I thought how clever and how important it was to surround yourself with such good people, exactly as you said. Um,
Absolutely.
Now, I heard this concept. You put an article out, and it was this concept of lead, or the lead parent, and I'd never
Mhm.
heard that before, and I just found it really interesting. And I'd love you to explain that more to the listeners.
Mm. Yes, well, that was the term I first came across reading Anne-Marie Slaughter's book, Unfinished Business.
Right.
And that was following an incredible article that went viral in The Atlantic. I think that was like a few years earlier than that. And she talks about caring versus competition, how important caring is, but we value competition in terms of roles. And she spoke about how her husband was the lead parent. So, really, when you think about it, we talk about homemaker, housewife, all these
Mm,
sort of things, but it's actually an important leadership role, taking on the
absolutely.
responsibility of running the home, running the family, running people's lives, nurturing them, supporting them, and being where you need to be. So I absolutely love that, and I really took that on, and I actually expanded it out to what we were talking about before in terms of project managing life. So I adapted that um, term and put it on my LinkedIn profile, and I call myself lead parent and family CEO.
I love that.
Because it is a leadership position, and I'm actually I'm not married. I was, so most people might refer to me as a single parent, but I actually say no, I'm a lead parent and family CEO. So then it like cuts out the stereotypes.
Absolutely.
It sort of gets people thinking a bit more about, and then reflecting on their own role in the family. And that's right, I did a post recently about who's the boss in your family, and I spoke about that.
Yeah, because I think, and you just sort of touched on it, how many roles you are playing, as
Hmm.
in in that family unit, from the, as you said, the CEO to the caring, and it takes time, it takes intelligence, and you're right. For so long you've sort of thought, well, you're the housewife, you're the secondary role. When no, absolutely, that family runs as well as it does because of the effort and you put in, and so
Mm.
leadership role you do. So I really like that. So how, from reading that and your own research, is that something, people, whether it's male or female, being that lead parent role, they need to feel proud about this, because previously they hadn't feel proud, like I didn't feel like, oh well, people look at me because that I'm not doing enough, but now no, I should be proud of this lead parent role I have.
Mm, absolutely, and so that was exactly my experience. So I went from corporate America one week to a first time mum the next week, and but interestingly, I valued myself and my role from the very start.
Right.
So I didn't have any challenges in that respect. It wasn't until I started speaking to other mothers who a lot of their identity was based on what they did at work. Mine never was. It was part of it, but not the whole thing. So I thought, what is it here? What's the difference? And it's because I really valued my role, because I saw it as incredibly important of raising flourishing human beings. Like, I'm not sure there can be a much more important role than that. But it's when we compare it. So we compare caring to competition. So when, we say we value caring, but not until we've got to pay for it. We actually value winning. So, because if you look at the pay scales in terms of, I think this is the best way to really illustrate the point. If we look at the pay scales across our professions and industries in Australia and worldwide, what you find is that people who are paid the most, right at the top, are people where there's a clear outcome of winning. So people who won the law case, sold the business, made the numbers, those sort of things. It's measurable. It's it's big. It's impactful. And then as you go further down the pay scale, and you hit around maybe middle, you've got teachers, and then you keep going down, nurses, childcare workers, aged care workers. And what's at the heart of that? Caring. And then if you go all the way down to parenthood, that doesn't get paid at all. Obviously, it's a vocation. But because what happens is there's no measurable short-term outcomes that we can ascribe a win or lose outcome to. So it's devalued economically. So that, I think, it's not necessarily personal, it's structural. That's how we operate. So if we look at, so the way to rebalance that is to be looking at the importance of these caring roles and the leadership position taken on in those roles. And this is the incredible thing I found in my research. It's that these skills that you build when you're a carer are incredibly needed and sought after in the workplace. So emotional intelligence, cognitive flexibility, creativity, innovation. Really, when you think about it, that's what you're doing constantly when you're caring. You're being adaptable. You're developing patience, empathy, all of these incredible skills. So you actually do take those into the workplace, but it's not really acknowledged.
And I love the word care. That is my favorite 4-letter word of all time. Like I love it more than love. I love it because you can fall in and out of love, but you can't fall in and out of being caring if you're a caring person. And I just, while you were even talking there, I was thinking about when you're talking about teachers. Well, teachers' assistants are paid less, but usually the care factor that makes a really good teacher's assistant. And so I just even thinking the way you're talking there. But what I also realize is where I helping people who are retiring when I was a financial advisor, the ones who were defined by their job are the ones who struggle absolutely the most. The ones who could absolutely have a balance. I'm not saying I would say work-life balance, but a balance between whether it was work, their home, the family, and all that, absolutely could adapt to retirement far easier. And have that community there in that care factor. Whereas if you're defined purely by your job, it's a struggle, and especially for men. I found it was unless you find what your next new challenge is, it's not going to be work. You're really going to struggle with retirement. But you was talking about your research, so it leads really nicely into your book, and I haven't finished it. I have to be honest. Breaking the Gender Code. I've got 2 adult daughters, so this is a very important topic to me because I've already seen their experiences in the workforce, male versus female. But I would love to hear, first of all, the reason why you decided to write this book, but what some of the anecdotes you found with the research that you did.
That is a great question, and I think it's also really helpful to mention what the subtitle is too. So it's Breaking the Gender Code: How Women Can Use What They Already Have to Get What They Actually Want. So that's kind of busting that having it all myth, because and that's what I talk about. But yes, so going back to that question about what is it, like what's behind that deeper reason why these intelligent, strategic women couldn't commit to their well-being, and they're feeling like they're not doing good enough at anything. So that sent me on this huge mission, and I used like neuroscience, social research, history. I delved right back to hunter-gatherers because I really wanted to nail this, like what's behind it. And that's when I discovered the gender code. So it's that set of default beliefs that pigeonhole the genders into different boxes, like the blue box and the pink box. And there's a training program a set of rules and expectations, and we're punished or rewarded based on how well we conform. And, there's a lot more detail to
I'm
that.
not recommending anyone to buy the book, but
yes. So please buy the book. Visit my website, and I'll sign it and send it to you. And that's a good way to do it. But yeah, I discovered this, the gender code, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is, what's going on here? This is so unfair. And I remember one time, speaking to my boys about it, and my 10-year-old at the time, he's now 14, he said, Mum, is your gender code anything like the coding we do at Code Club, at school? Because if it is, we can fix it. I said, oh, what do you mean, Leo? And he said, well, Mum, I'm the worker person in the family, because he's the middle child, and my big brother bosses me around. But in coding, whatever you're coding doesn't boss you around. I get to be in charge when I make my own code. I'm like, what, Leo? Okay, tell me more. And he's like, yeah. So, you can create code as a coder. You've got to know how the code works. And then you can delete parts that don't make sense. You can create, new parts and keep the things that do make sense. And you know what, Mum? The best bit is that not all code's been created yet. So when you learn how to code, you can create your own code. I'm like, oh my God,
out of the mouth of babes.
Yes. And so what that revealed is like a framework and some other things, but he helped me realize that it's like everything about us, nature, nurture, and neuroplasticity is bundled up into this code that we all have, and it's like a personal algorithm that we build, fed by the societal algorithm, the gender code and other codes, but we're in charge of it. We can expose it, decode it, and recode it. So that's when I thought, right, I've got to share this. So I bought all the really best bits and best practices and what's working well from all the people I interviewed and everything else. I came up with a framework called the Circle Framework. That's the second half of my book. And I thought, and we both know Jackie Lane. She helped me with this part. And because I thought, right, I've just got to share it more broadly. So I never set out to write a book. I set out to share the message. And then the next iteration of that is like we're both doing with speaking. So, yeah, that's how I got to where we are now.
And this is also what we do see is they always say that, the amount of executive and CEOs and high management, and there's some industries that just don't have women at all in those positions. So it's a big battle. It's but it's obviously something, if we can recognize it, work out what's causing it, you can provide a solution.
Absolutely. And there are so many brilliant people who are on this, and there's people who've been on it for centuries. So we're building on all of their sacrifices, all of their, the risks that they've taken. We're building on that, and it's the rate of change is getting faster and faster and faster. So it's a it's many-pronged approach. But there's the individual approach. So that's where I sort of focus sort of most of my energy and attention. So helping women and men and their teams and businesses understand the impact of the gender code and how to expose it, decode it, and recode it. Then there's also the societal aspect and the wider sort of organisational and structural side of things. And that takes a group effort. That takes a collaborative approach. So that's something that I think everyone can work on as well in their own little way, own large way, just chipping away at it, chipping away.
And what's the feedback? Because you've got the solution, but how has it been well received? How's the feedback, or is it sort of certain areas have received it well and other industries not at all? What's your experience so far on that?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I'm finding more and more men are attending the events that we're running. So when we're pitching, and this is what I find is the crucial thing, Mark, and you would know this quite well, is bringing in my business kind of approach. What I do is I start with, okay, what's your business, operational, and strategic and people objectives? Okay, so it might be, right, you want to be a top 1% employer. And this goes for all sizes of business. All right, so you want to be a top 1% employer. Okay, well, this is how you can do it. And you sort of reverse engineer it with more women in these roles. That's really generic because it's going to depend on each company. But this is how you can do it with more, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And I'll provide evidence, and then industry-specific evidence, and then I guess working out what's in it for them and their currency, and then using more equality as a tool, as a way to get there, as a pathway, rather than saying, right, this is the right thing to do, we all need to be equal, blah blah blah. Actually start with what they want, what they want to see the most. And that's where we're getting more men in the room, in construction, in engineering. The big banks and big accounting firms, I think, get it more. Pardon?
They're just slow to move.
So, yes, they are. They're massive, aren't they? They're like behemoths. But they have, departments dedicated to it. And but yeah, saying that, I know there's organisations I've been in on tenders for big projects where they've got all the bells and whistles, they've got everything set up for them, but they're still having pockets of unsupportive, like boys' club behaviour in certain departments, typically sales. So it's addressing it as we're meeting people where they're at, not doing a one size fits all at all, because that can alienate people, and also not othering anyone in the process. And I mean anyone.
And you obviously, when you said, what does a company want, you absolutely show that it will increase productivity. The bottom line, there's no question about that.
Yeah, it's productivity, performance, and profitability. We have a world-class data set in Australia where the Workplace Gender Equality Agency has been collecting data for over 10 years. So I think it's organisations with over 100 employees. So I think it covers about 4,000 businesses in Australia. And they've got a report on business and gender metrics. And what they found is, it is in black and white. Having more women in managerial roles and leadership roles, boards, execs, increases productivity, performance, and profitability, hands down. So we've got the numbers. And then if you dial down into actual specific industries, you can find the numbers there too. Like I've looked at that in terms of construction, engineering, finance. So the evidence is there. It's all out there. So really, it's not just the human thing to do. It's the sensible, savvy, commercial thing to do.
And I think that's the thing that gets lost. People don't think that's going to be the case, but it's absolutely right. One of the things, because I always had small business my whole 30, 40 years. And so if I had two salespeople and they were male or female, it never occurred to me I would pay someone differently or an admin staff. But I do see corporations, and I do remember the Association of Financial Advisors, when I was looking after that association, and we would run conferences, and we actually had a Women in Excellence award for what people are doing in the community. And the sponsor was a major insurance company, and they got up and said, "We're proud. We've got the smallest gender pay gap of our peers." And I'm thinking, why do you have a gap?
Yeah,
I was just being totally naive. I did not realize there would be a gap, but until after that, I just sat down there and say, "Tell me about this." But I realized it comes back to a lot. I also think about when we don't, as a society, talk about money. People around a table will not tell you what their salary is. And I think industries, especially large industries, have played on that, in that someone will come in and say, "I want a pay rise." Yep, I'll give that. But they know they're not going to tell their teammate. And if it's male or female, and unfortunately, something I keep telling my daughters, males do tend to go into pay reviews and say, "I want a pay rise," and women don't. And I just think big corporations have played on that, intentionally or not intentionally. And I think, I think anything like this is just so important because, as you said, from a productivity, performance, and what was the third P?
Profitability.
Profitability. It's so important that corporations get this right.
Absolutely.
Danielle, this has been, I've got about half a dozen more questions flowing through my head, but I also realize the time's coming to a close. So I just really appreciate your time on this. And maybe we can get you back, because I really have enjoyed this, especially hearing about some of the research, which I think it would be so helpful. But one of the things I always ask our guest is, as the final question, is what's the best piece of advice you've heard? What would yours be?
Excellent. So it is be where you are. So that's about presence, and so that you can really be who you are. So that's about building, the confidence in who you really are. So you bring the best of who you are to everything you do, and you can write your own code.
Wow, that's really important. You're absolutely right. Too many people think, when I do this or when I lose weight, I'll be better or something like that. So no, be who you are. No, I love that. Danielle, so appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you. It's been so much fun. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to know more about Danielle Dobson and breaking the gender code, visit her website, codeconversations.com.au. Also, feel free to either email me on admin@themoneysandwich.com or visit our website, themoneysandwich.com, if you have any questions or would like to learn more. Visit my website, themoneysandwich.com, for free templates, online calculators, and subscribe to our newsletter to help you now for a better retirement tomorrow. As with every podcast, this information is not advice, as not personalised to your own situation. And past performance is never guaranteed for the future. What we are trying to do here is to provide tips, coaching, and education to help improve your money knowledge, which we believe can only be a good thing. See you next time when we take another bite from the Money Sandwich.